I decided to camp alone for the first time in years. I had been stressed from work, tired of noise, tired of traffic, and tired of seeing people everywhere. I wanted space, and I wanted a place where nobody could bother me. I looked online and found an old forest preserve several hours away from my town. It wasn't a famous spot. There were no campgrounds, no marked trails, no bathrooms, nothing. Just open land, trees, and an old dirt access road that barely showed up on maps. That was exactly what I wanted. I left early in the morning, packed with basic gear: tent, sleeping bag, food, hatchet, and a new knife I bought the week before. The drive was calm at first, but the farther I went, the thinner everything became. Fewer gas stations, fewer houses, fewer signs. After a while, the road turned into a single lane through tall pine trees and thick brush. It felt like entering a place nobody visited anymore. When I reached a clearing beside a small lake, I decided to set up camp. The water looked calm, and there were no signs of people ever camping there. No fire pits, no trash, no boot prints. The grass was tall and wild. The air felt cleaner than anywhere I'd been in a long time. I set up my tent near the water, unpacked slowly, and then walked around the area to get familiar with it. The ground was soft, covered in leaves and moss. The trees were tall and thick, blocking most of the sky. The deeper I walked into the woods, the darker it felt even though the sun was still high. I kept going until I found something strange. A rope. It hung from a branch about 8 feet up. It wasn't new, but it wasn't old either. It looked like someone had cut it cleanly on one end, and the other end had a tight knot still holding onto the branch. It reminded me of a swing, except there was no wood, no board, just rope. I stared at it for a while and didn't know why it bothered me. It shouldn't have meant anything. Maybe someone was climbing there or using it to hang food away from animals. But something about the clean cut felt intentional, like whoever removed it didn't want anyone knowing what it was used for. I walked back to camp and tried to forget about it. I collected firewood, filtered some water, and cooked a simple meal. As the sun went down, the temperature dropped quickly. The sky turned dark fast because the tree line blocked most of the light. I lit a fire and sat close to it, listening to the forest settle. First, it was peaceful. The sound of frogs near the water, insects buzzing, small animals moving in the brush. It all felt normal. But slowly, little by little, everything went quiet. It wasn't sudden. It was like someone was turning the volume down on the entire forest. The frogs stopped. The insects stopped. Even the wind felt like it disappeared. The only sound left was the fire popping softly beside me. I tried to calm myself, but the silence felt heavy, thick, unnatural. I looked around the tree line, scanning for anything. A bear? A deer? Anything that could make everything else go silent. But I didn't see anything. The firelight only reached so far, and beyond that was just darkness. I told myself it was fine and eventually climbed into my tent. My sleeping bag felt warm, and for a while I just laid there and listened to nothing. It was strange hearing only my own breathing. No traffic, no talking, no distant cars, no environment sounds, just silence pressing against me. I finally drifted into a light sleep. Sometime during the night, I woke up to a sound. Footsteps. Slow, steady footsteps walking on leaves just outside my tent. The steps didn't sound like an animal. They sounded controlled, careful, almost cautious, like someone trying not to make noise, but still making just enough that I could hear it. My heartbeat got loud. My body went cold. I didn't move. The footsteps circled my tent. Slow, steady, dragging just slightly at times. I could picture someone walking around me, examining the tent, maybe trying to see if I was asleep. There were no voices, no flashlight, no talking, just movement. I kept my eyes open even though it was pitch black inside the tent. I waited, barely breathing. After a long time, the footsteps stopped. Then I heard something worse, something that made my chest tighten. Breathing. Slow, steady breathing right against the thin tent wall behind my head. I could hear it clearly. Someone was only inches away from me, standing there, listening. I stayed still. I didn't move a muscle. The breathing stayed for several minutes, then faded slowly as the footsteps began again. They moved away from the tent, back into the trees, growing quieter until they disappeared completely. I didn't sleep after that. I waited for morning, checking the tent zipper every few minutes even though I never touched it. When the sun finally came up and light filled the clearing, I unzipped the tent carefully and stepped outside. The first thing I noticed were footprints. Not animal prints, boot prints. They circled my tent and led toward the woods. Fresh, deep. Someone had been there. Then I saw something hanging from a branch near the fire pit. Piece of rope, cut exactly like the one I saw earlier in the woods. But this one had something tied to the bottom. A small metal tag, dirty, rusted, worn. I didn't want to touch it, but I did anyway. When I turned it over, my stomach tightened. There was a number scratched into the metal. 14. That meant nothing to me, but it meant something to whoever put it there. I packed everything fast, faster than I ever had before. I didn't look into the woods. I didn't check the lake. I didn't stop to eat or rest. I threw everything into the car, turned the engine on, and drove out of there without even checking the map. The whole drive back, I kept checking my mirrors. I didn't see anyone, but the feeling didn't go away. Not even when I reached paved roads, not even when I reached town. The worst part is, when I got back home and unpacked, I found something I knew I didn't bring. A second metal tag. In my backpack. Same shape, same rust, same carved number. 15. That was when I knew the truth. Simple, real, and terrifying. Someone else was out there long before I arrived. And they weren't just watching. They were counting. I met him the first year I worked maintenance for a summer camp way out in the woods. He was the kind of guy everyone knew before they even met him. Loud laugh, big personality, always joking about everything. His name was Phil, but everyone just called him Sawblade. And it wasn't until my second day that I realized it wasn't just a weird nickname. I remember standing near the storage shed while he lifted his hand to wave at someone across the yard. At first glance, it looked normal until you noticed the missing fingers. His pinky and ring finger on his right hand were only half there. Clean cut. He joked about it constantly. One of his favorite lines was, "If I wave too fast, people think I'm flipping them off." Every time someone new reacted to it, he acted like it was the funniest thing in the world. But underneath the jokes, there was a seriousness he didn't hide. He always told new workers to be careful. He'd pause mid-laughter and suddenly switch into lectures about tool safety or paying attention to where your hands were. He said accidents happen fast. He said you don't get a second chance when you're working with something sharp or spinning. He made the same speech every year on the first night of staff campfires. No one interrupted him because everyone knew the funny guy became someone different when he talked about it. He would stare into the fire and tell the story about losing his fingers in a work accident. No jokes, no noise in the background, no smiles. But later, after everyone went to bed, he always pulled another version of the story aside when he talked to a few people near the coals. A darker version. One that wasn't public. I wasn't supposed to hear it. I stayed later than everyone else that night because I was new, shy, and unsure whether I needed to clean something up or just go to bed. So I sat on a log in the dark with my hood up, listening. Phil said he didn't just lose fingers to a saw accident. He said someone cut them. He said years before he moved and started working at the camp, he used to go hiking alone. He liked being out in places where there were no roads or noise. One trip took him to a forest far north. Quiet, untouched, miles from any town. On his third day out there, early in the morning, he said he woke to footsteps outside his tent. Slow, soft, controlled footsteps. Not walking past, circling. He stayed still. He thought it might be a coyote or a person. He didn't know which was worse. When the steps stopped right beside the tent, he said it felt like everything around him froze. The air, the woods, even the wind. Then something pressed against the tent wall. A hand. Human. The outline showed clearly through the fabric. But it wasn't normal. The fingers weren't the right length. Two were longer than they should have been, stretched oddly. The proportions were wrong, like someone tried to attach pieces together and didn't line them up right. Phil said he didn't move. He didn't breathe. He didn't want whoever or whatever was out there to know he was awake. After a long time, the hand slid away, slow and deliberate. He heard the footsteps continue circling once, then fade into the woods. He packed up and left immediately. Didn't eat, didn't drink, didn't look back. But night fell before he could get back to the trailhead, and he realized he wasn't alone anymore. He kept hearing movement in the trees, not animals, not random snapping. Footsteps, matching his pace. When he stopped, they stopped. He walked faster. So did they. When he finally ran, something grabbed him from behind. He said there was no yelling, no struggle, no wrestling. Just a hit to the back of the head. Fast, sharp, and then everything went black. When he woke up, he was lying face down in dirt. His hand was numb, but he could feel something wet and warm dripping down his arm. He tried moving his fingers and couldn't. He rolled onto his back and saw blood, a knife, and two of his fingers lying neatly beside him, like someone had cut them with unbelievable precision and left them arranged purposefully. Next to the fingers were others, old ones, dried and shriveled, lined up in uneven rows. Some small, some large, some with skin that didn't look human anymore. Phil said he never saw the person who did it, but he knew they were still out there when he heard breathing close by. Slow, calm, measured, like someone watching a project they were proud of. Phil didn't wait. Adrenaline pushed him to run, and he didn't stop running until he reached other hikers. He never returned there, never went back for his gear, never spoke to police. He said he didn't want to live the rest of his life waiting for someone to come find him again. After Phil finished telling that story, nobody laughed. Nobody moved. The fire crackled quietly, and the woods behind us felt darker than before. Phil said he didn't know what that person wanted. Maybe the fingers were trophies, maybe replacements, maybe experiments, maybe something else we couldn't understand. But he always ended the story the same way. Somewhere out there, someone is collecting, not hunting animals, not stealing jewelry, but searching, matching, testing, quietly, patiently, not taking whole hands or arms, just pieces, just what they need. Phil continued working at the camp for years, always laughing, always joking, always wiggling the mangled shape of his hand at new staff just to watch their reaction. But every night when we stayed late by the fire, he stared into the trees the same way. Not afraid, not paranoid, just aware, as if he was waiting to hear footsteps again. Every time I go camping now, I think about him. I think about the forest being big enough to hide someone who has patience and time. When the fire burns low and the woods get quiet, I always check the darkness around me. I don't believe in ghosts or monsters, but people can disappear into the woods for years, and sometimes they come back looking for something they left unfinished. I remember that night so clearly, even though so many years have passed. I was about 14, and it was my first time camping away from home. The camp was deep in the woods, far from any town, and the only way in or out was a long dirt road that twisted through trees for what felt like forever. When we first arrived, everything felt exciting. The air smelled like pine and dirt, and everything was quiet except for birds and the sound of wind pushing through the trees. The cabins weren't fancy, just wooden buildings with bunk beds, dusty windows, and old creaky doors. But as a kid, it felt like an adventure. The evenings were when the whole camp gathered near the fire. The heat from the flames felt good against the cold night air. The counselors always told stories. Most of them were silly or fake ghost stories, but one night, the main counselor, his name was Mark, said he had a real story. He spoke slowly, like he wanted every word to stick. He told us about a body found in the woods years ago. A large man, fast kill, no signs of a struggle. The only thing strange was the missing fingers. Half of the pointer, ring, and pinky finger were gone from the left hand. Police searched everywhere but never found them. A few weeks after that first body, he said another body was found. This time the man was smaller. Same missing fingers, same fast kill. Again, no clues. Weeks passed. Then a woman. Then more victims. Each one smaller than the last. Until eventually it was children. Each time, the killer seemed to be taking those same 3 fingers from the left hand. Mark said people were terrified. No one wanted to go hiking. Parents stopped letting kids play outside. The police worked day and night but couldn't find any answers. Then he told us about the teenage boy. He was found in the woods like the others, but his body was different. Only the ring finger and pinky were missing. The pointer was still there, and it was covered in dried blood like someone had tried to cut it but couldn't. Police found a fingerprint on a piece of metal near the body. It matched the missing teenage boy's prints from a theft record. That meant the killer had touched the victim, and some evidence said maybe the killer tried to attach the fingers. Mark stared at all of us, letting the firelight flicker across his face. Then he slowly took off his glove and showed his hand. His left hand. The pointer finger was heavily scarred. The ring and pinky were half gone. Then he suddenly lunged forward and screamed. A few kids cried. I remember my stomach dropping. My hands were shaking even after he said it was just a campfire story and that he lost those fingers in a work accident. He told us he shared that story every year. Everyone laughed eventually, but I didn't. I kept thinking about how calm he was when telling it. How detailed it was. Too detailed. The idea stuck with me even after the fire burned low and everyone went to sleep. Something about the way he said it felt wrong, like maybe it wasn't just a story at all. That night, I barely slept. Outside the cabin window, I kept hearing branches crunching, like someone walking. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured someone in the woods cutting fingers off bodies. Eventually, exhaustion won and I slept. The next day felt normal. Breakfast, games, swimming. Nobody talked about the story. Felt easier pretending it was fake. But that night, when everyone returned to the fire pit, Mark wasn't there. The other counselors just said he'd gone into town for supplies. They acted calm, but something felt off. They were quieter, more watchful. They kept looking toward the dark tree line like they expected something. Hours passed and Mark didn't come back. A storm began rolling in, and thunder echoed far away. We were told to go back to cabins early. I remember walking through the darkness with only a small flashlight. The woods felt different that night. Heavier, like something was waiting. When I finally crawled into my bunk, the rain was falling hard. Wind hit the cabin walls and made them shake. Water ran along the window glass, and thunder rolled again but much closer. I tried to distract myself, counting breaths until I calmed down. But then I heard something outside. Not thunder, not rain. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, close. My body froze. My breathing stopped. I waited for them to fade, but instead they came closer to the cabin wall. Then I heard scratching. Not random scratching. Careful, slow, like someone running their nails across the wood. Everyone else was asleep. I didn't want to move or make a sound. My heart was pounding so hard I thought whoever was outside could hear it. Then something tapped the window. Once, then again. Harder. I stared at the glass but couldn't see anything through the reflection of the room. The tapping became a scraping sound, like someone dragging something metal against the outside of the window frame. That's when lightning flashed, and for a split second I saw something. A hand. Not the whole person, just a hand pressed against the glass. It was missing fingers. I pulled the blanket over my head and stayed like that until morning. I don't remember falling asleep. I just remember daylight finally showing through the window and everything looking normal again. The woods were quiet. No footprints, no marks, no broken branches. At breakfast, everyone was asking where Mark was. The other counselors said he still hadn't come back and that they were calling the park rangers. They told us we were going home early. When the buses finally arrived, I remember looking back toward the woods. Deep, dark trees stretched forever. I felt like someone was watching us leave. A few months later, I searched online for anything about missing campers, missing hikers, anything that could match that story. Nothing exact came up, but there were news articles over the years about bodies found in forests all over the state. Some unsolved, some without details. Now, years later, I still go camping sometimes, but I don't camp deep in the woods. I don't camp near places without cell service. And I never camp anywhere near that old campground. Because sometimes, late at night when I'm alone and the forest is quiet, I think about that missing counselor, that hand on the glass, and the story he told like it was just a joke. And a part of me believes the truth wasn't the scary story. The truth was the warning hidden inside it. Someone out there wasn't done looking for the right fingers, and maybe still isn't. I drove into the mountains later than I planned. The sun had already dropped behind the tree line, leaving the sky a deep navy blue with just a thin stripe of fading light. The forest looked darker than I expected. The road was narrow, cracked, and uneven, with long stretches where branches hung low enough to scrape the roof of my car. I kept telling myself it was fine. I just wanted a quiet weekend alone. No work, no noise, no people. I finally reached the campsite I had marked on my map days earlier. It wasn't an official campground. It was just a small flat clearing next to a creek I found online while searching for secluded places. I wanted silence, and I definitely got it. There was no cell service, no lights, no nearby cabins. Just trees, rocks, and the sound of running water. I unpacked my gear slowly, trying not to rush even though the darkness made everything feel tense. I set up my tent, hammered the stakes into the cold ground, and built a small fire using dead wood scattered around the clearing. It felt good once the fire started crackling. The warm glow pushed the darkness back, and I finally felt like I could breathe. For a while, everything was normal. I cooked a simple meal, just canned chili heated over the fire, and ate while listening to the creek. The night air was cold, but refreshing. The stars were bright and clear. I remember thinking that this was exactly what I needed. Just space, just quiet. But after an hour or so, I began to notice something that made me uneasy. It took me a moment to understand what felt off. There were no insects, no crickets, no frogs, nothing. At first I didn't think much of it. But after sitting there, staring into the fire, I realized how unnatural the silence felt. When you're deep in the woods, even at night, you always hear something. Wings, clicks, chirps, movement in the brush. But here, it was like everything around me was holding its breath. Even the wind felt still. I tried to ignore the feeling, but the longer I sat there, the worse it got. The silence made me feel watched, even though I saw nothing. I finally decided to go into my tent and try to sleep. The fire was still burning low, and I left it going because something about letting the clearing go completely dark bothered me. Inside the tent, I zipped myself into my sleeping bag and tried to relax, but it didn't work. My mind wouldn't settle. I kept thinking about how quiet everything was. My breathing and heartbeat sounded too loud. Eventually, maybe an hour later, I started drifting off. My eyes were heavy, and my body finally relaxed. Then I heard it. Leaves crunching. Not wind. Not branches falling. Not animals scurrying. Slow, heavy footsteps. They came from somewhere beyond the firelight, somewhere deeper in the woods. The sound was steady and spaced apart, like someone walking upright. Not crawling, not running, not small. Human steps. I froze. My breathing got shallow, and my chest tightened. I didn't move. I didn't zip open the tent. I didn't reach for anything. I just listened. The footsteps stopped after a few seconds. Silence returned, thick and suffocating. I waited, counting my own slow breaths in my head. I don't know how long I stayed like that, but eventually I convinced myself it could have been a deer. A large one. Maybe elk travel that area. I don't know. Anything was better than the thought of someone out there. I eventually drifted back into a light sleep. Then something woke me again. Except this time it wasn't footsteps. It was breathing, not mine. Slow, muffled, steady breathing just inches outside the thin layer of tent fabric. I could feel the hairs on my arms stand up immediately. The breathing was low and slightly raspy, the kind a person makes when they're trying to breathe quietly but can't completely control it. I didn't move. I didn't even swallow. I just laid there, every muscle locked, listening. The breathing stayed there for a long time. I could tell the person, because I knew now it was a person, was close enough to see the shape of my body inside the tent. My sleeping bag trapped heat, but my skin felt ice cold. I thought about making noise. I thought about talking. I thought about unzipping the tent and confronting whoever was outside. But every idea felt stupid and dangerous. Eventually, after what felt like half an hour but was probably only a few minutes, the breathing stopped. Then the footsteps returned. Again slow, again deliberate, moving away from my tent. I waited until I couldn't hear anything. I didn't sleep again that night. I stayed frozen until the first weak light of morning reached the clearing. When I finally unzipped the tent and stepped into the cold morning air, the forest looked normal again. The silence from last night was gone. Birds were chirping. Wind moved the branches. The creek sounded louder. For a moment, I wondered if I imagined everything. But then I saw the footprints. Deep impressions in the dirt around my tent. Large, boot-shaped prints leading from the trees to the spot right beside where I slept, then back toward the woods. My fire was completely out. Not burned down, but smothered. Someone had stomped it out. My equipment looked slightly moved, just enough that I knew someone had touched it. The worst part was what I found tied to one of the tent stakes. A strip of dirty fabric. Torn, dark, worn. Looked like part of an old jacket sleeve. It was tied in a tight knot like someone wanted to leave it there intentionally. A marker. A sign. I grabbed everything as fast as I could. I didn't pack neatly. I just shoved whatever I could into my car. The whole time I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see someone step out from behind a tree. Even once I was in the car driving fast down the broken road, I never felt safe. Not until I reached the next town an hour later. I didn't report anything. I didn't know how to explain it without sounding insane. No one harmed me, nothing was stolen, and technically nobody broke any law. But that night changed something in me. Now, whenever someone talks about peaceful camping, fresh air, or quiet forests, I feel my stomach tighten. Because I learned something out there. Something real, something simple. The woods aren't empty. And sometimes someone else is already there, watching. I always thought the best campfire stories weren't about ghosts or monsters or old legends everyone already knew. The good ones, the ones that actually stuck with people, were the stories that felt personal. The stories connected to something real, something you could see and touch. Something that didn't feel like it came from a book or a movie, but from a real moment someone lived through. That's what made mine work. I didn't plan it. I didn't sit down and write something clever or creepy. It happened because one summer, without meaning to, I brought something with me that changed the way kids looked at me forever. It started my second year as a counselor. The camp was deep in the woods, far from the nearest town. The cabins were old, the paths were narrow, and at night the only light came from the moon and whatever lanterns we carried. Every night, after dinner, the counselors would gather campers around a fire and take turns telling scary stories. The first year, I used one of those recycled stories everyone hears growing up, some hitchhiker ghost story. The kids forgot it the next morning. But that second year, things changed. Earlier that spring, I had broken my front tooth. It wasn't some dramatic fight or accident. I slipped while unloading gear from my car and cracked it on a metal railing. They couldn't fix the real one right away, so I had a temporary cap. Came out easily, almost like it wasn't meant to stay on unless I wanted it there. I hated it at first. I was embarrassed. I kept my mouth closed in pictures and avoided smiling too wide. But the night of the first campfire that year, something happened. I didn't have a story ready. I didn't think about it until the kids were already sitting around the fire waiting. I remember the flames moving across their faces, making their eyes wide and reflective. They expected something good, something personal. So I made one up. I said there used to be a man who lived in these woods long before the cabins were built. He wasn't a bad man, but he believed every debt should be paid. The story said that if someone broke a promise to him, he didn't take money or objects. He took a tooth. Just one. A reminder. A mark that you owed him honesty. I told it quietly, slowly, adding small details as I spoke. How people would find carvings on trees shaped like teeth. How sometimes hikers found strange footprints around their tents. How people said losing a tooth wasn't the punishment, it was the warning. The real punishment came later, if the lie continued. The kids leaned in. Nobody laughed. Nobody interrupted. And when I reached the end, when I said the man still walked the woods at night listening for lies, I paused. I looked at the fire for a long time, letting the story settle. Then, without saying another word, I lifted my hand to my mouth and popped out the fake cap. It looked like part of my front tooth was missing. The gap was jagged, wrong, just enough to make it look like something had been taken, not lost. I didn't smile wide or joke about it. I just looked at them, expressionless, letting the missing tooth speak for itself. The reaction was instant. Some laughed nervously, telling themselves it was a trick. Some went pale. Some stared like they weren't sure whether they should believe the story or not. But the best reaction was from a kid sitting directly across from me. He looked at the missing tooth, then at the dark woods, then back at the fire. He didn't say anything, but I could tell his brain was working hard trying to decide if I was joking. I didn't tell them it was fake. I didn't explain anything. I just told them it was time for bed. That night changed something. For the rest of the summer, kids avoided lying around me. They watched what they said. Some even covered their mouths when they talked to me, like the missing tooth made me something dangerous. It became a tradition. Every summer I refined the story, made it more subtle, more believable. I didn't make it ridiculous or supernatural. I kept it grounded. The kind of story that made you think instead of scream. I only used the tooth reveal at the very end, and only when I felt the room shift and the kids stopped seeing me as a storyteller and started seeing me as part of the story. But there was one night I'll never forget. It was late in the season. The sky was clear, no wind, no insects buzzing. The woods were unnaturally still. The fire felt louder than usual. The kids that night were older, maybe 13, old enough to act bored and pretend nothing scared them. The story worked differently on them. They didn't laugh or whisper. They just listened, serious and quiet. When I popped out the tooth at the end, nobody gasped. Nobody jumped. But every single one of them stared. And then one kid, a quiet boy who barely spoke all week, lifted his hands slowly and covered his front teeth like he was suddenly aware of how fragile they were. That small movement hit me harder than any scream or reaction ever had. Later that night, when everyone was sleeping, I stayed by the dying fire longer than usual. The woods were still quiet, too quiet. I thought about how strange it was that a simple prop, something I didn't plan to use, had given me a story that stuck with people. Not because it was supernatural, not because it was bloody, but because it felt connected to something real. Because at the end of it, I wasn't just talking about a story. I was showing proof. I eventually got the permanent tooth replacement. The gap is gone. The smile is normal again. The easy prop is gone. But sometimes when I go camping alone and stare into a fire, I think about those quiet nights in the woods. About the stillness and the silence and the way real life can feel close to a story if you're not paying attention. I don't tell that tooth story anymore. Not because it stopped working, but because sometimes the story you create ends up changing you more than the people who hear it. And now, whenever I'm in the woods at night, I can't help but check the darkness behind the trees, just to make sure no one is out there waiting for me to finish my part of the deal. I used to love working as a camp counselor. I wasn't the outdoorsy type at first, but after my first summer, something about the quiet nights, the smell of pine, and the crackling campfire just hooked me. The kids always expected scary stories, and since every counselor needed one, I made one up. It wasn't perfect, but over time it turned into something the new campers whispered about before the first night even came. The main idea was simple. A ghost that would kill you unless you gave him 2 of your teeth and the names of 2 other people he could go after instead. I crafted it slowly over the seasons, added details, changed timing, built tension. The kids sat around the fire with wide eyes and shaking hands, waiting for that last line where everything snapped into place. The story wasn't really the important part. What made it effective was the delivery. I spoke differently when I told it. Slower, lower. The woods helped too. The trees around us blocked out wind, so everything felt still, like the whole forest was listening. Shadows stretched across the firelight, making everything look slightly wrong. The kids barely blinked. They hung onto every word. But what sold the story, the part that made it stick in their heads and make them whisper about it in bed, had nothing to do with ghosts. It had everything to do with my own teeth. When I was growing up, 2 of my adult teeth just never came in. For a long time, I had a retainer with fake teeth attached to fill the gap. Nobody really knew unless I told them or unless I took it out, and most people never saw that happen. So I used it. At the very end of the story, after I explained the rules of the ghost and how people escaped him, I paused. I waited. I let the silence stretch long enough that they thought the story was done. The fire popped, crickets chirped, and that thin night air felt like it was holding its breath. Then I'd say something like, "But the strange part is, people say once you give up your teeth, your smile never looks the same again." And while their eyes were fixed on the fire or the dirt or their own feet, I'd pop the retainer loose silently using my tongue. Then I lifted my head and smiled. A wide, empty, toothless gap right where 2 teeth should have been. Kids froze. Some stared. Some gasped. Some covered their mouths. Some started crying. Then I'd just stare at them for a second with that empty smile before putting the retainer back in, patting the nearest shoulder, and sending them off to bed. Every year it worked. Every year, kids whispered about me like I actually made some kind of deal with something. They avoided making eye contact with me for the rest of the night. Some even avoided me the next morning. I never corrected them. I let the rumor grow because that was half the fun. But one year, that last year, things changed. It didn't go smoothly. Not at all. It was late in the season, end of July. The kids were older than usual, maybe around 12 or 13. Older kids didn't scare as easily. They acted tough. They pretended the fire didn't freak them out and the shadows didn't make them nervous. You could tell by how they leaned back instead of forward, how they smirked instead of listened. That night felt different. The woods were quieter than normal. No wind, no bugs buzzing, just still, heavy night. I started the story like always. They didn't look scared, not at first. They just stared with that forced confident look, pretending they already knew how it would go. But slowly it shifted. That stillness around us helped, the tension grew, and by the time I reached the part about naming 2 other victims, nobody was laughing anymore. The firelight reflected in their eyes, and for a moment, they looked much younger. Then came the ending. I waited for the silence. I pulled the retainer out. I gave that same toothless grin. And just like always, it hit them, except this time nobody screamed. Nobody cried. They just stared, wide-eyed, too long. Like they weren't reacting, they were processing. When I told them to head back to the cabins, they didn't move right away. They got up slowly and walked without talking, without running, without the usual nervous energy. They looked back at me more than once. Later that night, while I was cleaning up by the fire pit and making sure the embers wouldn't flare, I heard footsteps behind me. I assumed one of the kids came back to ask to use the bathroom. But when I turned around, it wasn't one of the kids. It was one of the older counselors, someone who worked there longer than I had. He stood a little too close, staring at me, not smiling. He finally looked down at the bag of ashes beside me, then back up at me. He lifted his lip with 2 fingers and showed me something I'd never noticed before. 2 empty spaces, 2 missing teeth. Not fake, not part of a joke. Real. And without saying a word, without laughing, without smiling, he turned and walked back toward the staff cabin. I stood there a long time after that, just staring at the dark trail he disappeared down. My chest felt tight. My hands felt cold. For the first time, the woods didn't feel playful or fun. They felt unfamiliar. Wrong. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, the older counselor acted normal. Made breakfast, helped organize activities, talked and laughed with the kids. Nobody else noticed anything strange. But I did. Because sometimes the scariest part isn't a ghost story. It's realizing someone near you believes it isn't a story at all. I finished that summer, but I never went back to work at that camp again. And I never told that teeth story again either. Not because the kids couldn't handle it, but because one person did. And I'm not sure whether he was confirming the story or continuing it. I still remember the first time I heard the story. I was a teenager at a summer camp, sitting around a fire late at night with other kids. The flames were bright, the woods were dark, and everything felt distant except the cracking fire and the counselor telling the tale. It stuck with me for years, not because it was bloody or supernatural, but because it felt real, too real. The kind of story that hides inside your mind and waits until the woods are quiet and darkness feels heavy. Now, as an adult, I go camping every year. And every year, when the fire burns low and the woods grow silent, I share that same story. I don't joke about it, I don't smile when I tell it, and I never add anything extra. The story doesn't need help. It's already unsettling. The story was about a body found deep in the woods. A big man, someone strong, someone you'd expect to be able to defend himself. But he died fast. The police said it looked like he had been taken by surprise. Nothing strange except for his left hand. Half his pointer, ring, and pinky fingers were gone. Cut clean, not torn. Nobody ever found the missing pieces. They searched the area, searched nearby streams, searched bags and containers. Nothing. A few weeks later, another body appeared. This one smaller, a thinner man, younger maybe. Same missing fingers, same hand, same clean cuts. People in the small surrounding towns locked their doors, kept kids inside, and stopped going into the woods unless they had to. The police set up trail cameras, did patrols, and interviewed anyone who even looked suspicious. But nothing happened for a while. Then body number 3 was found. A woman. Same fingers gone. Same hand. Same precision. She was even smaller than the last victim. Over the next few months, the pattern continued. The bodies kept getting smaller. It was like something or someone was searching for a perfect match. By the time bodies of children showed up, the whole area was terrified. Parents wouldn't let kids ride bikes or walk to school. People boarded up windows, bought guns, installed alarms, even though nobody believed alarms or locks would stop someone like that. One body stood out. Teenage boy. His death was the same, quiet and quick. But this time only 2 fingers were missing. The ring finger and pinky. The pointer was still there, damaged and bloody, like someone tried to remove it but failed. The police found something at that crime scene, a fingerprint. They matched it to the teenage victim's record. He'd been caught stealing once. But that wasn't the part that scared everyone. The fingerprint was smeared across a metal tool found near the body. Cutting tool. Meaning the killer touched the victim after the fingers were cut. Meaning the killer wasn't just taking fingers. He was trying to attach them. That was the moment the story grabbed me and never let go. The idea of someone trying finger after finger, body after body, searching for one that fit. When the counselor told that part, he leaned forward and said that maybe the killer wasn't done. Maybe he was still out there, walking through forests, waiting. I remember lying in my bunk afterward, listening to the wind move through tree branches. The cabin wasn't sturdy. The door rattled when the wind hit it right, and shadows moved across the thin curtains when clouds hid the moon. I pulled my hands under my pillow. I kept checking my fingers without meaning to. That night, I barely slept. And what made it worse was what happened the next morning. Police cars arrived at the camp. They walked around the property, talked to counselors, checked footprints in the mud near the edge of the woods. None of us kids were told anything, but every adult looked tense. Nobody made jokes that morning. Nobody acted like it was nothing. We left 2 days early. For a long time, I told myself it was coincidence. Maybe there was a missing hiker. Maybe someone reported an animal attack. Maybe the cops were just being careful. There were 1,000 possible explanations. But years passed, and the story never faded. In fact, it got worse. Every couple of years, there would be some small piece of news, another body found in the woods somewhere in the state, always with the same missing fingers. Never the exact same area. Never a clear link. Always unsolved. The news never tied it to the same killer officially, but people online did. Thread after thread from hikers, hunters, campers. People saying they heard footsteps at night. People finding clean-cut dog or deer bones missing small parts. People waking up to find their backpacks opened, not rummaged through, just inspected carefully. Some people even said they saw someone walking in the woods late at night. Tall shape, limping, wearing gloves. I don't know how much of those parts one believe. The internet exaggerates everything. But there's one thing I never forgot. About 5 years ago, I went camping alone. Not deep in the wilderness, but still far enough away from towns and roads. Late at night, When the fire burned low and everything was still, I heard something. Not an animal. Slow footsteps in dry leaves. They moved carefully, like someone didn't want to be noticed. They stopped just outside the glow of my firelight. I couldn't see anything clearly, just trees and darkness behind them. My whole body froze. I remember thinking how soft the footsteps sounded, how patient, how human. Minutes passed. Then the footsteps moved again, slow and steady, fading into the distance. I didn't sleep at all that night. I packed up when the sun rose and left. Now, whenever I tell this story, it isn't because it's fun. It isn't because it's shocking. It's because sometimes the world doesn't need ghosts or monsters to be terrifying. Sometimes it's just a person, someone patient, someone determined, someone who doesn't stop. And whenever I tell it, especially when the fire gets low and woods go quiet, I always check the darkness behind the flames. Because somewhere out there is someone still searching. And they're not looking for bodies. They're looking for a match. I went camping because I thought I needed a break from everything. Work was stressful, people were getting on my nerves, and every day felt the same. I wanted silence and space, so I picked a random forest area a coworker mentioned once. It wasn't an official campground. It was just deep woods near a small river with no cell service and no nearby towns. I packed food, water, a first aid kit, a tent, a sleeping bag, and the basic stuff people usually bring. I didn't plan much. I just wanted to be alone. The drive took almost 4 hours, and the last part of it was on a dirt road covered in leaves and branches. The road was narrow and uneven. Trees hung low over my windshield, and the farther I went, the more the world behind me felt like it disappeared. It was just trees, dirt, and sky. When I finally reached a flat clearing near the river, I parked and turned off the engine. There was no sound except the soft rushing of water and distant wind pushing through the trees. Felt peaceful at first. Exactly what I wanted. I set up my tent near a large fallen tree trunk. The river wasn't loud, but close enough that I could hear it from camp. The ground was soft and covered in pine needles. Everything smelled like dirt and cold air. After setting up, I walked around to explore the area. There were no signs of other people. No old fire pits, no trash, no footprints, no cut logs. It looked untouched. But about 15 minutes into walking, I saw something strange. It was a tree tall, dark, and thicker than the others, marked with deep horizontal cuts. Not random scratches, not animal claws. Clean, straight lines, spaced exactly apart from each other, like tally marks. I counted them, 12. Something about it made me uncomfortable. It didn't make sense. The forest felt old, and nothing around me looked used or disturbed. Yet someone took the time to mark that tree. I stood there staring at the marks longer than I should have. The forest around me felt still, too still. No birds, no bugs, no movement. I walked back to camp, trying not to think about it too much. I told myself someone probably used it as a marker for hunting or navigation. It didn't have to mean anything. As the sun dropped, the forest got cold. I built a fire using small branches and broke apart the fallen tree trunk for larger fuel. The smoke rose slowly because the air felt thick and heavy. I cooked a simple meal, just canned food warmed over the fire, and sat back against my backpack. The darkness came fast. It wasn't like normal nighttime darkness. It was heavier. The trees blocked most of the sky and the stars. The fire felt like the only thing keeping the night away. I listened to the river, but after a while, the noise faded because something else became more noticeable. Silence. Complete silence. No crickets. No frogs. No owls. It was like the entire forest froze. I tried to ignore the feeling crawling up my spine, but the quiet pressed against me. I decided to go into my tent earlier than planned. The fire still burned low outside, and I figured it would go out slowly. Inside the tent, everything felt small. I zipped myself into my sleeping bag and closed my eyes. I wasn't sleeping, just laying there, waiting for my mind to settle. It felt like hours passed, though it was probably only half an hour. Then I heard it, a sharp snapping sound from the woods, like someone stepped on a thick branch. My body locked up instantly. I opened my eyes and listened. At first, there was nothing. Then another crack. Then slow footsteps. Not animal movement. Not random rustling. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate steps breaking leaves and twigs, one after another, coming toward my camp. My breathing got shallow. My heart hammered hard in my chest. I didn't move. The footsteps stopped right beside my fire, close enough that I could picture someone standing there watching the tent. There was no talking, no movement besides breathing, deep breathing, slow and steady. I could hear it through the tent fabric. My skin crawled. I stayed still, not daring to make noise. I don't know how long they stood there. Time felt strange. Could have been seconds, could have been minutes. Then, slowly, the footsteps moved again, circling my tent. Each step felt careful, measured. I stared at the tent wall, waiting for a shadow or a hand or something, but nothing happened. After another minute, the footsteps faded back into the woods until I couldn't hear them anymore. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I just laid there frozen, listening for anything. Every tiny sound made me tense. When morning finally came, I unzipped the tent and stepped outside. The fire was out, completely stamped out. Not burned down, not smoldering, just flattened, like someone pressed their boot onto it. Then I saw prints, boot prints, large ones. They circled my tent once, moved toward the river, then back to the woods. Fresh, clear, close. I followed them just far enough to see where they led, straight to the tree with the tally marks. Except now there were 13. One more line, fresh, cut deep and clean. My stomach dropped hard. Something inside me knew exactly what that meant, even if I didn't want to believe it. 13. One line for each person, one line for each night, or one line for each visitor that never left. Whatever it meant, it wasn't random. I packed everything fast, throwing gear into bags, not caring how messy it was. I didn't look back toward the woods. I didn't check the river. I didn't hesitate. When I got into my car and drove away, I watched the tree marks fade in my rear mirror until the forest swallowed everything. I didn't stop driving until I reached a gas station with people, light, and noise. Only then did I feel like I could breathe again. Even now, weeks later, I still think about it. Not the footsteps, not the fire, not the breathing in the dark. What I think about most is how neat those marks were, how perfect the spacing was, how fresh the last line looked, like someone had been waiting, watching, counting, and for one night, I was number 13.